you guys how to catch the longest redfish? The longest redfish. Where are the boundaries?
Boundaries are from the Skyway Bridge to the Gandy Bridge. So basically it's everything east of 275 to the Gandy. There's no, we're playing halfway, but it has to stay east of 275 all the way up.
No, that's too bad because there's a lot of 3-foot redfish on the other side.
And are
The reason for it is we want to try to keep it fair for everybody. Because a lot of people are more familiar with the other side of the bridge. There's a lot bigger redfish there. And here is pretty much fair game.
It's going to make it challenging. There's two schools of thought when you're targeting redfish. You can go for numbers, and fish, cut bait or live bait. Is it whatever method?
Whatever method, and you can fish from a boat, kayak, wade fish, however you want to fish, as long as it has to be by rod, reel, hook, and bait.
No cast
It is no cast net. And believe it or not, it is legal to cast net a redfish in the state of Florida. But no cast netting in this one, please.
Now, I'm not above natural bait presentations. I do it all the time with clients when I have to. But when I'm trying to locate fish and find them quickly or catch numbers of fish, I usually power fish zones, trying to locate the right size fish. Because my job as a guide in the flats class charter business is to put them on quality fish and teach them how to use artificials versus just putting them on numbers of fish that may be 18-inch redfish or just run-of-the-mill redfish. Now, from day to day, that changes. Nature determines on what's going to lend itself to be easy to be caught that particular day. I'll put it in golf terms. If the wind's blowing at 35 miles an hour, you're probably not going to shoot your best score. You're just not. And the same thing holds true for fishing. Weather can predicate your success. So when I'm going to have the type of day that I'm looking for the longest redfish, and that's all I'm looking for one fish, I probably don't want to get bogged down waiting on a fish to come to a natural bait or a scented bait like a plastic bait. I'm probably going to want to just fish as quickly as I can and cover as much water as I can and only catch big ones. The best way to eliminate small fish is to use a topwater. When I competitively fished in the past, in the Ranger years, that's what I did. Once we got to a point in the well where we were at 2 6-pound or 6.5-pound fish, I knew there wasn't a whole lot of room for improvement. I would fish a topwater for the rest of the day. I may not catch another fish again, but if I catch one, he'll probably be 8+ pounds. He'll be a big fish because a topwater bait is an alpha bait. It's the type of bait that always draws the biggest fish strike. Occasionally you'll catch sort of a smallish fish, but 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a quality fish. Example given, I was out Friday. I just got back from the Keys, but I had a trip I had to run on Friday with a gentleman who has never even fished a bait caster in his life. He bought one. He said he got it for Christmas. He bought it for himself for Christmas. It still had the rubber band on the spool on his bait caster when he brought it in my boat. So we spent about 35, 40 minutes showing him how to set the bait caster up for different plugs and jigs where he could cast it. And I told him just to lob it first to sort of get the hang of it. We went from that point on and we started fishing. Well, over an hour or two throwing that bait caster, he got a little more confident. He generated a little bit more rod speed, and I was letting him throw a topwater plug. I made a change about halfway through that morning, and I ran to a flat that was super, super skinny, and I started push-pulling up on that flat. And I saw a weight coming across the flat, and I was like, here comes the redfish now. He goes, well, how can you tell? I was like, I'm telling you, it's a big redfish. It's on the other side of the bridge. So pulling up there, and the fish goes by the boat. He makes a cast, and he just was so amped up, he threw past the fish and never got it in front of the fish, and the fish swam on by. But it was like a 3-foot redfish. It was like a 36-inch redfish. So we push-pulled a little bit further. I could see another one pushing up there. I was like, just keep scatter casting this thing, power fishing with this bait, making as long a cast as you can, and working it back and going around the clock. I was like, you're going to get one of these because there's probably enough amount here for you to catch. He ended up catching a 34-incher in about 12 casts. So that's what I'm saying. Topwater fish, if you topwater fish, and that was a she-dog. He was using a she-dog, and it was one of the colors that I had left over is something moving, looks like a mullet across the surface, and they'll hit it. But that big topwater plug is going to generate, in this type of tournament, your best results. You can throw jerk shads and tube baits and throw spoons, and I love to throw spoons because I think they produce numbers of redfish. But what I would do if I were going to participate in this tournament, which I can't, but if I were, I would take a spoon and start the day off with a spoon just to get a fish, just so you can say, okay, this is my, is it photo release, or take a picture of a fish. At least you're on the board. You won't be going to the bar later embarrassed because you didn't catch a fish by throwing a topwater all day. At least you'll have a redfish. And then just as soon as I caught one and took a picture of it, from that point on, all I would fish is topwater. Because you will catch one. This is a brand new mirror lure, and I don't know for a fact that Eric will put these in the captain's bags or the angler bags. But it's a Mirror Mullet XL. Basically, it's the Catch 2000 body style. It's unlike any of the topwaters that they've come up with in the past that are real big. They sit low in the water and they knock. And sometimes in real slick or calm conditions, they'll scare fish, and they don't work as well for redfish. But I took this plug, as ugly as this one is, because when he gives me free plugs. Now, if I need the one for the show, I go to the shop and I pick them out myself. If I let Eric pick them out, he sends me all the colors nobody else wants. So he sent me that electric chicken color, and I didn't care. I just went up there and I started throwing. I figured I'd catch some trout. I caught 3 redfish on topwater that morning on that plug in Upper Tampa Bay. I was fishing up there near Rocky Point and Courtney Campbell. 3 redfish on it, 1 trout in a couple of hours, just knocking around with a trolling motor. Just seeing what it looked like. It swims beautifully. But the fact is there's a lot of people that tell me, I've never caught a redfish in Tampa Bay on a topwater plug. I guarantee you, if you throw a Mirror Mullet XL in that tournament, you throw it all day long, you will absolutely catch a redfish on that bait. Because that bait is the perfect bait for them. It has a real tight wiggle that doesn't go side to side. It's not real noisy, and they can get up behind it and get a hold of it almost every time. So a Mirror Mullet XL, give it a shot. I guarantee you'll catch a redfish on that plug. If not, you're going to catch something on it. It catches everything. It's turned into one of my favorite topwaters that they produce. Absolutely. But start off with that aqua dream spoon. I've got a green one on here for a reason. I believe that the fish here don't see that color very often. It blends into the grass real well, and I think it catches a lot of fish. If there's mullet present, or if you got overcast skies, gold spoons work great. But as soon as you get real bright blue skies, or a day that's not got a lot of wind on it, it seems like gold spoons don't work nearly as well unless you take some sandpaper and rough them up and take some of the finish off them so they're not so shiny. They're almost too shiny at times. But those colored spoons that Aqua Dream makes, like the pink and the black nickel, and that green one in particularly, and there's a white one that you can use too, they work great on all conditions. So I just decided, well, if they work good all the time, I'll just use them all the time. They work fantastic for me. As far as areas to target between the Gandy Bridge and the lower end of the bay here at the Skyway, I grew up fishing a lot of Joes and Two Brothers and Bishops and fishing around Port Manatee and Piney Point and moving up to Cockroach and the Lower Manatee River. Those are all great zones. You guys, being that you're in the South Shore Anglers Club, I'm sure you guys exploit those areas on a regular basis. Those are all good areas. But if you want to try something different, there's areas that you might not think of as good areas to fish, like Pinellas Point, fishing in between those docks, those flats in between those docks. At Pinellas Point, that works really well. I do good in that. In fact, one of my biggest secrets in catching fish with clients, lots of times, if it's a Friday or a Saturday or a Sunday, when there's lots of traffic on the flat, and it doesn't have to be fishing traffic, it can be pontoon boats, personal watercraft, just anything driving me nuts. I'll fish those areas when I first get out there in the morning, and then by about 9:30, 10 o'clock, when the pressure is too much for me and I'm losing my temper, I start moving and fishing those intercoastal flats that are in between the docks, the long docks, and I focus on those little pieces of flat. And is there 10,000 redfish and you're going to see a 500 fish school up there? No, you're not. But it's amazing. You can pick through those docks, you know, with spoons and plugs and work in plastics really fast, swimming plastics. And you can catch 2 or 3 redfish, you know, every 1,000 yards. It's just amazing. And every once in a while you'll surprise yourself and catch one that's 35 inches long. So there are areas that don't get used. And on busy days, that's a zone that I target a lot, or places like that. The outside of the bars, lots of times, those bars that run all the way from Joe Bay, the bridge, when you're running all the way up, a lot of people will fish the mangrove shoreline because they fixate on a visible edge like that. You can do just as well on the inside of those bars, those first couple of 100 feet there in those potholes, especially if the tide's going out. You can fish a lot of those zones in there and do just as well on those outside edges. I do really well, especially if there's like a break in a bar, like a little trough or a funnel, and it's moving water. Those fish sometimes will sit just outside the bar. The true secret to finding redfish is try to find the redfish that no one else can get to. They either don't see them because they're in a little bit deeper water, or you get real skinny, like if you're in a kayak and you fish the fish that the big boats can't get up there on top of all the time. One of the two. Usually when you're in a skinny boat, you got to be, you know, whether it's a boat or a kayak or whatever, you have to be extremely quiet, make super long casts to catch those fish. Where the deeper fish, they're a lot more forgiving. I call it dumb depth. You know, you throw a jig in there, just hop it a few times. You don't have to do anything perfect, but you still catch fish. When you get in skinny water, when the bait goes out there, everything's got to be just perfect, and it's got to be their idea to get caught. I'll put it like this: if you're fishing mullet, or if you're fishing like a windy shoreline, you can get away with a more erratic retrieve. You can get away with not the perfect color bait. It doesn't have to look dead on perfect. It can come into them; they'll probably still eat it. If you're in a slicker, clean water situation, there's not mullet around. You want to be able to make a bait look like a live bait because it's going to have to be perfect for them to want to commit to it if it's a fake like artificial. So I don't hop a jig, you know, plastics like a jig head and a glass minnow body, or just any type of paddle tail body. That's one of my favorite tactics. That's like a soft plastic spoon. It's just to take. I use Strike King or Z-Man plastics. They're Elastec, so they're pretty resilient to pinfish. But just make a super long cast. As soon as it hits the water, just start rolling. With your rod tip up a little bit, like in this fashion. You want to roll it like this so that there's angle on that tip. Where if something bumps it, you can set the hook. If you got it down like this, sometimes you can't react fast enough where you don't feel the water get broke up behind it. But I just make a long cast and I just roll it. No hopping and jigging. All that hopping and jigging does, the only time I ever hop and jig is if it's pretty deep water. But if you just roll a plastic on a jig head, like a 3/16 jig head or a 1/4 ounce jig head with a paddle tail body, and it's just swimming naturally like that, fish, they see it, it looks natural, they go right after it and hit it every time. It's the number one thing I used to do in tournaments. Every time you hop and jig and do all that, you catch all those undesirable fish, ladyfish, little trout. They like all that crazy stuff that goes on. Big fish, they don't dig that. They just want it to look real. And they want it going away from them. The better the conditions, the bluer the sky, the cleaner the water, the shallower the water, the further it has to be away from them, and it has to be going away, so that when they're sitting over here and that thing looks like it's running away from them, they'll go after it. But if it's coming into them, or you throw it too close to them, they'll spook out every time. You figure out real quick that you can't do that. You have to make it their idea. It's just, that's the way it is. That's nature. So as soon as you figure that out, you got to pick more natural colors in those instances as well. But you're always going to catch a lot more redfish that you can't see than the ones that you can see. So if you're thinking that you're going to sight fish these fish on perfect days, most of the time you're wrong. It's tougher to do it that way. Unless you can make a super, super, super long cast. And I call it sight fishing. If I see a wake and I know it's a redfish, I'm still sighting them and I'm leading them to catch them. I use extremely long, I like long rods. This is a 7.5 foot rod. I use 8 foot rods sometimes. I like rods that are real soft. I don't like, you see a lot of guys use medium heavy rods or these stiff rods, you know, the jackfish. You can't throw them. I'll fish with a lot of couples on my boat.